All right. Welcome on a very fun day here. It is Memorial Day. Sorry, I almost said Labor Day. Always get those mixed up sometimes. But we are part of the IDP guys here, Steve and Matt. We love to play IDP fantasy football, and this is the first episode of the IDP Plus podcast. Now, you might be wondering what the Plus is all about, because we play all sorts of fantasy football. That includes, of course, offense. Probably we're both still in some leagues with kickers and team defenses.
Oh yeah.
Right? So we're going to be talking about not only IDP, but all the cool, fun stuff that goes along with fantasy football in general. Sprinkle in some gambling talk, try to make you guys some money on top of your fantasy football entries, and really just help everyone manage the teams. Is really, I think, the goal of this podcast is to have fun, talk about IDP primarily, sprinkle in some other stuff, and hopefully help you guys manage and win your league. So, Matt, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here. It's an exciting time. It's a fun time of the season to be
Yeah.
starting these types of conversations because the draft obviously just happened, but OTAs are starting to happen, and the dynasty drafts are happening. I know for me personally, some of the rookie drafts are happening. Some are already done, but even redraft things are starting to pick up too. So it's an exciting time to be talking all things fantasy.
Us true degenerates, which is what we
Mhm.
both basically are, have been knee deep in the weeds already since the NFL draft, probably since before the NFL draft, since free agency frenzies were going on. So we've been thinking about fantasy football pretty much since the Super Bowl ended. So this is a 24/7 thing for us, which
It
is
never ends.
yeah, which is why we wanted to hop on here and give our thoughts and opinions, and hopefully as we grow, get some feedback from people, and like I said, just try to dish out some top-notch advice here. So yeah, like you said, rookie drafts are in progress. I know I'm in the middle of a dynasty startup, so like
Mhm.
some of you may be coming here, just waking up, thinking about fantasy football, that's on the horizon for redraft league. Some of you may be like us, who have been knee deep in it here for a few months already. But we want all of you. We want everyone here. We're gonna go shallow, deep. We're gonna try to help everyone here. So. But with the focus being on individual defensive players. So if you found us and you don't know what IDP is, or are sort of dipping your toe in the water or thinking about IDP, trying to learn about IDP, we're here for that too. We're going to talk strategy. We're going to talk high level IDP 101 type stuff. We're going to try to throw it all against the wall here and cover everything. So, Matt, if you were going to describe IDP to someone,
Mhm.
what do you think you would tell them?
So I love bringing IDP to new people. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, maybe not obviously, IDP stands for individual defensive player. So traditionally in fantasy football, you will have your offensive starters, your QB, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, kickers, and there's been this thing for a while, team defense, where you get points based
Mm-hmm.
on how the entire team does. The entire team defense does in any given game. IDP kind of just expands on the team defense idea. So instead of having an entire team defense, you have the individual defensive positions. So you'll start potentially some linebackers, safeties, cornerbacks, depending on the format of your league. But really, it gives you an entire other side of the ball to be paying attention to while watching games. So I know my first interaction with IDP, it's a bit daunting when you first get in. There's a whole
Yes.
other side of the ball of players that you've never really been paying attention to. I know I'd been playing fantasy football for, I don't know, 10 to 15 years before I even got into IDP. And yeah, there's like, oh my gosh, like even looking at these names you're seeing right here, like who are these people, right? You know the players on your own team, but you don't really know everyone else.
Yeah.
But once you get dip your toe in, once you start learning some of the names, it just totally expands and makes the viewing of games that much better. Because now all of a sudden, you have your slot wide receiver make a catch, which is exciting. But all of a sudden, that linebacker you have makes the tackle, which gives you points, like double the points. It It sounds intense, but it's really not, because once you start, and all of the websites they have out there, this is the big thing for convincing people too. They have rankings for everyone. It's all built in. You don't even have to know these things going in, because on your ESPN draft board or whatever, you'll see Nick Bosa already there. It's just expanding the player list by a little bit.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. And I want to add on to the being daunting aspect too. I totally get that. Lots of people are hesitant to try this because I don't. It's hard enough for me to know the third wide receiver on the Cleveland Browns. Now I need to know 11 starting defensive players on the Cleveland Browns. No, thank you. And possibly their backups. No, thank you. So I get that, but we want to try to make it easy. Understand that's what we're going to do for you here. We're going to help you learn those players. If you are interested and you do want to take the dive, we are here to help you learn these players and who they are and what benefits they can provide to a league that uses individual defensive players. So please don't think it's too daunting. I know it definitely can seem that way at first, but man, once you're in, I've never gone back.
You can't go back. You can't go back.
Yes. So great. That was awesome. That was a great explanation. So yeah, we're going to dive right in. For our first episode here, we are going to take a look at current ADP versus the IDP guys consensus rankings. Now, these are dynasty focused, but similar to offense, dynasty versus redraft is a lot closer than people like to think it is or do think it is, right? Yeah, there's some super deep like rookies and guys that might be waiting in the wing to come up, but for the most part, it's still very much a year-to-year game being played. So, even thoughts of, I know dynasty for offense, we like to think of a 3-year window. Well, that's becoming more and more crazy the more you think about it with how quickly things change here. So, I mean, very few guys stay relevant and atop, the fantasy rankings and as a good or great football player for more than 3 years. Maybe your quarterbacks do, but beyond a handful of quarterbacks, I mean, you've got very much outliers who stay atop of these things. It is very fluid every single year. So despite this being dynasty focused, I think it does have a lot of application to if you are playing in redraft leagues. So this is we here over at the IDP guys, our website is focused on IDP. We do cover offense in our articles and our rankings. We have some really comprehensive rankings. Matt, you're a part of the consensus here.
Oh, yeah.
How much fun is it to be ranking 800
Oh,
plus players?
It's crazy.
Yes. So we put in the hard work for you there doing that already, and hope to spit out, some winning rankings here for you. So this is we also, in conjunction to rankers, we actually go out there, find people who play IDP leagues, and we do mock drafts with them. We do 25-round startup dynasty mock drafts, and we collect the ADP data to see, what are actual people who play this game doing and who are they taking. So right now what we're going to do is take a look at that data on the left. Who are people actually drafting and where, versus what are myself and Matt and a few other folks here at the IDP guys think are the top players in terms of a ranking standpoint. So who would we take going down in this order here? So we have the top 25 at each section here. Top 25 ADP versus top 25 consensus rankings, and we're kind of just going to do a quick comparison here, starting from the bottom up. And we're going to start from the bottom up because I think that helps touch on some names that maybe don't get talked about as much as the top tier guys. So once we get to the top tier, and they're, even if you're just taking a quick look here, there is a pretty, the guys are off by a spot or 2 or 3, nothing too crazy, but at the bottom here, there's some names that don't exist on one side that do exist on the other, and vice versa. So those are guys I love to talk about. Why are people drafting Shaq Leonard as the LB 17 and the 25th defensive player, yet he's not in our top 25, rankings. I don't believe it. Yeah, I don't think I see him on
Sure
there.
isn't.
So,
He sure is not.
so I think he's a really fun guy to start with, right?
Yeah.
He's been a monster he's been one of these guys who's been atop the rankings pretty much since he's a rookie. However, last year ran into a lot of issues with injuries. He's a little bit older now. So, but he's got the name value. And we see this happen with offense too all the time, right? Name value still gets you some clout and cachet. So, so we've got Shaq Leonard going as a 25th defensive player to LB 17. What are you doing with Shaq Leonard, Matt?
I am letting someone else draft him as linebacker 17. It's
Love it.
it's he's a fun test case, right? Because like you said, it's truly the name. That's why he's here, based off of previous production. Obviously, he came out with a bang. Looking at his stats in his rookie year, 163 combined tackles, 7 sacks. That was his peak. He's gone down every single year. I'm not saying that the averaging before his injury riddled last year, about 120 combined tackles per year. That's nothing to slouch at, right? That's still pretty good. But he was being drafted because of his rookie campaign. I mean, as up there as linebacker 1 for a while. And then his injury thing last year, we didn't know if he was going to be on the field or not. He ended up not being there. I'm still worried that he's just not going to play as much. Obviously, the funny seeing Fabio to the right of him in the consensus ranks as they were on the same team. I guess the one nice thing we can have for Shaquille Leonard's potentially bounce back year is that Okereke is gone. Okereke is on the Giants, which we'll talk about him in a little bit. Love him. I love his spot there on the Giants. So, I mean, I guess when you're getting to linebacker 17, you're talking like linebacker 2 for most of average IDP leagues. I guess it's a scratch off ticket. If he's going top 25 of IDP, though, I think there are some safer bets and there's some safer value for people, like Okereke. Or CJ Mosley, who's also not in that ADP range there. I'd rather have them than the unknowns.
And that's the kind of stuff I like to hear. Who would we rather have, right, than the guys that we kind of are surprised to see squeeze their way into the top 25 of ADP here. So I love that. Yeah, that's a perfect take. I'm pretty much right in step with you on that one. He's his ceiling, we know the ceiling, right? It's great. It's going to be tough. I mean, back injuries on a football player, neck, that's kind of scary stuff to be dealing with. So, the guy who kind of also took off out of nowhere last year, a guy like Zaire Franklin, is making his way. So we'll touch on him too. But yeah, so Shaq Leonard is kind of a buyer beware, right? If you're taking him in a startup, just make sure you're adding depth to your linebacker room on your fantasy team there, just in case he does miss games or misses significant time again this coming year. But if he's starting in week 1, he's absolutely in your starting lineup. But we just think at this point there's some safer guys, like you said, and age. Of course, Dynasty always gets the age bias, and he's no spring chicken anymore. 28 in football years is getting up there a little bit. So that's Shaq Leonard is definitely a guy. We're not totally anti him, just at that particular range, right?
It's the price point, because even if he gets back to what his standard deviation, like 130 combined tackles and 3 sacks, that's good. That would be good for last year to be about linebacker 30. Like, we're not even talking top 20 linebacker production with those kind of stats. So the fact that he's going at 17, it's the name, it's the rookie year, it's it's maybe some of our tools have him ranked higher, so people are just automatically drafting him there. But I think there are, like we said, don't want to be a dead horse, but there's some better options out there for you at that spot.
It's going to be interesting how it shakes out if he is healthy with snaps and everything with Franklin. So that's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on. I have some opinions on Franklin too, but so we're going to go back and forth here. So we're going to flip over to the other side to the consensus ranks. Our top 25 defensive players is the LB19 Bobby. How you say it? Everyone says his last name differently, so I'm going to go with Okereke. Fabio. We'll stick with Fabio. How about
Bobby
that?
O.
So he was a free agent this year. Signs, I think he was a three-year deal, possibly. I don't know the exact details, but he's with the New York Giants now. And they gave him a fairly substantial contract. I know pretty much any NFL contract means nothing because they can always get out of it, right? So like,
Yeah.
it's tough to say follow the money 100%, but there's nobody there with him. This is the thing. Jalen Smith did not get brought back. Landon Collins, who was playing some like safety linebacker hybrid, has not been brought back. Beyond that, the guys that are still there, it's a bunch of late round, 6th round guys who sporadically played and aren't much of a threat. Fabio is going to play. If he makes it through a whole year, he's going to be in the 98 to 100% snap range. And those are the kind of guys we like for IDP production. So I'm a big fan of him. I'm probably a huge driver of him making it to the top 25 here. I think I've got him probably closer to my top 12 linebackers overall. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's in order to this is going to be some advice that's good reminder for us old veterans and good for newbies. In order to score points, especially in IDP, you need to
Yes.
be on the field and playing. A
Right.
lot on the offensive side, you can have like a specialist running back that just comes in, like Jamal Williams, on the goal line and score however many touchdowns you score and be very fantasy relevant with very low snap counts. It's very difficult to do that on the IDP side.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look for people that will be out there. Bobby Kerke is not a good example of this, but you can be just a bad player on a
Yeah.
bad team. Think like the Texans defense last year. Those linebackers were very fantasy relevant because they were on the field a whole lot because the Texans were playing defense a whole lot.
Yes.
And someone has to make tackles and make plays, right? So you look for people that are going to play. There is no one
Yeah.
on the Giants. I
Yeah.
really like Darian Beavers as a sleeper.
Yeah.
He missed all of last year,
Mhm.
his rookie campaign because of a season-ending injury. I forget exactly what it was.
Yeah. I think
But
ACL.
looking at ESPN's depth chart, he's starting right now.
Yeah.
Like there is no one. Micah McFadden had a chance last year to be relevant once
Right.
Blake Martinez left, and he didn't really do a whole lot.
Mhm.
Like everything you said, Santa. So I love Okereke here at linebacker 19. I'm going to be targeting him everywhere because people kind of forget about him. He
Mhm.
crushed it with the Colts last year. The Giants have the need and they paid the man, so he's going to be playing a lot.
Yeah. He's I think depending on the size of your league and the depth of knowledge of the players your opponents against, I mean, he could be considered a sleeper
Oh
in
yeah,
some leagues. So he's a guy we're very high on. Have some very lofty projections in place for Fabio. So and like you said, there's absolutely nobody. He's been handed the 100% middle linebacker on a silver platter in this defense. So yeah, there's other guys that of course are going to play. We're probably going to see, and a lot of teams are doing this. More 3 safety, maybe 2 linebacker looks. So it feels like it's going to be a big rotation, and those guys, Beavers, Micah McFadden, are also used as like pass rush specialists at times. So they're going to get a handful of sacks, and they're going to look nice one week. You're going to add them, and then they're going to give you 3 points the next week. And those are the kind of guys we try to stay away from, unless of course you're playing a best ball league. But for more traditional leagues, Fabio is going to be the guy that
oh
you're going
yeah.
to want there. So he's a steal at linebacker 19, even in the rankings. His
Mhm.
ADP, I don't have it here in front of me, but if you become a subscriber to IDP, guys, you can get all that great information. But it feels like he's a steal even at ADP as well, especially if
100%.
it hasn't made it to the top 25 or LB greater than LB 17. So flipping back to the ADP side, we have a D lineman, defensive tackle, Christian Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins. I mean, this guy is just the epitome of consistent and provides you an incredible tackle floor at the defensive tackle position, which is often it's not very deep in terms of good players who can be fantasy relevant. It's very deep with good NFL players who affect the game, not in the box score, but giving you fantasy production and showing up on the stat sheets. This is one of the most consistent guys out there. Would like to get a little more sack production from him, but hey, with what he does everywhere else, he bats down passes, he tackles running backs frequently. So he's giving you a really nice floor to work from. And then if he does happen to chip in 4 or 5 sacks a year, that's kind of just gravy on top. So I'm a fan of Wilkins. I think this is a very fair position to have him. Feels like maybe a little early to make it, depending on your league structure. And this is a big thing we deal with in IDP, right? Like, do you use defensive tackles or do you just use defensive line? We try to make not a huge deal of that kind of stuff. It's important to understand, but it's not important to get you to play the game. So even if you only use defensive linemen, he's a worthy guy. He's going to show up at the end of the year as a top scorer for defensive linemen, whether you combine defensive ends and tackles. So big fan of him here. Nothing bad to say about his position here in the ADP.
Yeah, and he's a great guy. Apparently, my fiance went to high school with him, actually in
Wow,
Connecticut, and
that's
said
cool.
he was just a big teddy bear who
Yeah.
also wreaks havoc on opposing teams. Uh, no, everything you said, I agree with. This is a perfectly reasonable landing spot for him, especially if you're thinking about dynasty. He's young. He's only had 4 years in the league. He improves every year, especially on the defensive line. You are looking for that tackle floor. Most scoring, you get something for tackles. There are some more splash play heavy leagues out there that you want more sacks, but especially on the defensive line. So whether you're using edge, whether you're using defensive tackle and DE, whatever format you're doing, you can't go wrong with a tackle floor, and that's what Wilkins gives you. I like a lot what the Dolphins have been doing there too in the offseason. So DL 11 as he is here, totally reasonable. You He's relevant in all formats.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he should be drafted no matter what format you play. We will have some episodes in the future, kind of big picture, talking through settings, setup, what type of leagues you play. We'll absolutely be getting in. I love talking through that kind of stuff myself.
Yeah.
Kind of the behind the why we're playing and what aspects. So, but right now we're gonna hit you with these players. So we like Wilkins there. I don't think he didn't make it to our top 25, but I think we're a little more. We try to provide rankings in sort of like a balanced format.
Yeah.
Nothing like too crazy it's really, so sacks are kind of the skeleton key, right? As far as scoring. So that's going to either propel defensive linemen way up or kind of keep things even keeled, and linebackers are your king. So he didn't make it to our top 25, but I know he's just right outside of there. So
100%.
not a problem with him showing up where he did. So flipping to the other side now on the consensus ranks, number 24 is our LB 18, CJ Mosley from the New York Jets, playing in that Robert Saleh defense, which always gives production to especially that top linebacker, and even the second fiddle. We saw Quincy Williams have a really nice year for IDP. So Mosley's getting up there in age. He's older than Shaq Leonard. I think he's 30. So little concern there. But we've seen linebackers, the elite guys are similar to quarterbacks where they can play into their 30s. We're seeing Demario Davis defy the odds and do it. So I'm not like super concerned about his age, and I think this is a totally fair ranking here. I'm still in on CJ Mosley. Again, another guy who's just ultra consistent, and any big splash plays he gives you are sort of just cherries on top. So I really like CJ Mosley in this range here. And a lot of people, I think if you are doing dynasty startups, you could probably get him cheaper than this and maybe, roll the dice and wait and grab him at a value because people are playing the whole age bias game. So that would be my thoughts on Mosley.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I don't know how you usually handle your dynasty startups, at least, but I like players that are playing and are going to produce, right? Like I again, these rankings that we have here are more for dynasty purposes. Like you said, he's older, so there are some players that you'll see above him that he will probably outscore this year.
Right.
But like
Right.
for the longevity of the next, 5 to 10 years, he'll be less. So that's why he's there, because he's shown no indications of slowing down. He had nearly 160 combined tackles last year, 7 pass defense. Like he's a stud. Like he is a stud. But like you said, in a dynasty startup, would I rather have a linebacker that was drafted in the 4th or 5th round? I'm thinking like I'm going to completely mispronounce his name, but Overshone, who went
Okay.
to the Cowboys, right?
Right.
Do I
Right.
want to take a flyer on him, who
Hmm.
all intents and purposes might be great, might not, or do I want to get
Hmm.
1 or 2 years of pert near elite production
Yeah.
from a guy like CJ Mosley? I guess more I lean towards the Mosley route. I don't know where you
Yeah.
go. But the fact that he's linebacker 18, the productions he's given us for his entire career is kind of funny. But if you can get
Exactly.
him at 18, kind of like a Karake, you're doing pretty
Yeah.
well.
That's just money. So I like to I'll take my shots sometimes, my home run shots maybe a little earlier. But if guys like this fall to me, I mean, I'm scooping them up all day. These vets that are just not super exciting names anymore. That have he was I believe first round draft pick.
Mm.
With the Ravens originally, like people forget about these guys so easily. It's really crazy because right, everyone wants the new shiny toy that we haven't seen. But what if the new guy could be so much better? And of course, and sometimes I take my home run shots. Honestly, my strategy in dynasties, I'm usually punting IDP for the most part because
Mm.
it's you've got 11 players on that side of the ball who can score points versus just 6 on offense. So I'm trying to take my shots on offense, and then guys like Mosley are usually falling to me when I'm ready to start taking my IDPs in the teen rounds, the double digit rounds. And then I just love it. I love scooping them up every single time they're there. So absolutely, he's a solid vet. Um, so okay, this next guy I believe is the first one that is going to appear on both sides of the list, so we can take care of him. So
Mm-hmm.
on the left side, he is the 23rd defensive player off the board. On the right side, he is our linebacker 7 and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eighth, yeah, eighth or ninth overall defensive player in our dynasty rankings. And that would be the linebacker in Green Bay, Quay Walker, first round draft pick out of Georgia last year. Played next to Devondre Campbell, who had been a stud for IDP for the past couple of years, but is also getting a little long in the tooth. Along comes Quay Walker. They take him in the first round. He was actually the first linebacker taken that year.
Mm-hmm.
Many people thought it was going to be Nakobe Dean. I think someone else went in the first round, but I believe Quay was the first one.
Was Devin Lloyd in the
So
first round?
who?
Was Devin Lloyd first round?
Yeah, that's who it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe he did get taken before Quay. I can't remember
No, Quay was
now.
first. I'm pretty sure.
He was first. Okay, good. I thought I had that right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you being my fact checker. I have the thing up on my screen, so it's tough for me to flip screens right now. But so I'm going off pure memory, which the old Santa noggin works
Mm-hmm.
50% sometimes. So, but no, so Quay Walker, I think is primed to take a huge leap this year. He was okay last year for IDP. He was very like kind of boom bust. He came on much stronger towards the end of the year, as many rookies do for any position, offense or defense. Most rookies aren't, giving you elite production starting in week 1. That's very rare. So Campbell also dealt with a handful of injuries. I think he missed a handful of games. And Walker, had some really good games when he was the number one main guy, working with backups playing alongside him. So hopefully with Campbell being healthy, he's still there. But I think they're ready to kind of hand the keys over to Walker. So I know I'm projecting Walker as like really aggressively this year. I think he takes a big leap. I think he finishes as an LB1, whether it be points per game or total finish. Obviously health rides on everything, but yeah, very bullish on Quay Walker this year. I think he kind of absorbs the Devondre Campbell role from the past couple of years when he was going off and in LB1. So really, really a big fan of Quay Walker this year.
Oh, 100%. And he was in linebacker 2, linebacker 3 when Campbell was on the field too, which is important. He played 82% of the defensive snaps, which
It's
again,
not bad.
very important. A number I usually use is you want your linebackers to be playing above 80% of defensive snaps. That's usually a good indication of their standing on the defense, and gives you, again, a good opportunity for a stable floor of tackles. So I love Quay Walker. I was hugely in on him last
Mhm.
year, which ended up working out.
Nice.
I love that he's being drafted as linebacker 16 for
Yeah.
ADP, because that means that I can get him at
Um,
a discount. I'm right there with you with Quay being right up there, especially in Dynasty. As a rookie, played that much, was that productive. The
mhm.
Packers are kind of going through a regime change, as we know, but they'll be
Yeah.
looking for those young stars that they're going to have for him at least another 3 years. Like Campbell's not
Mhm.
getting any younger. He has injury risks.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you were to tell me that Quay Walker ends as a top 12 linebacker, I would say, yeah, I'd hope so. Like I kind of have higher kind of have higher expectations, especially when with the Packers' new look offense. We don't know how successful that's going to
Yeah.
be. I expect the Packers are going to be playing a lot of snaps on the defensive side of the ball. So love Quay Walker. I'm
Mhm.
glad that he is getting some of that recognition that he deserves.
Mhm.
Making this top 25 list is no, gimme on the ADP side, but I
Right.
think I think we should be bumping him up a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, at that value, that's incredible. I mean, you can see the discrepancy that we have by almost 10 spots there. So, in just the positional ranking. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was a great point you made about the other side of the ball. That Green Bay offense, we really don't know what to expect. We basically got a rookie quarterback. He's been sitting, yes, but he hasn't been playing. So, uh, they could be 3-and-outs very frequently, and that's going to leave the defense tired, and that's going to leave them on the field, and that's going to leave them,
Hmm.
lots and lots of plays potentially here to make IDP plays for your fantasy team. So,
Yeah, and,
yeah.
and I know some people might be worried about Lucas Finesse joining that defense too, taking away some
Mm,
stuff. I think they're going to be using him in a different spot. I think he'll be used more as a
yeah.
pass rush.
Yes.
So I don't worry about that until we see it on the field. But I wouldn't be worried about that.
Mhm. Yeah, there's nobody really to worry about except for Devondre Campbell. But like I said, I think we see a role reversal there. I think
Yeah.
we see Quay going more, exceeding that 90, maybe 95% of snap role, and we see Campbell more of that 80 to 85% role. And if they don't do that, I would really question the coaching decisions there. So
100%.
uh, so now on the flipping back to the other side on the consensus ranks, we have our first defensive back make the list. So this is our 23rd defensive player ranked on the website. Jalen Petrie, the safety of the Houston Texans. When I said you don't get elite production often from guys starting week one, here's a guy that sort of defies that logic, which is why I think us as a company are so bullish on him as well. And somehow Petrie didn't, I believe, yeah.
He sure
Um,
didn't.
Petrie did not make the top 25 ADP. So, often people sort of fade defensive backs, and I am a fan of that strategy. But man, if a guy like Petrie is not in the top 25 defensive players being drafted, I think that's a steal. So there's really not much reason to think, okay, yes, he had a almost historic, I would say, rookie run there.
Oh yeah.
So could there be a bit of regression? Of course, but there's nothing to say that he's not going to play as much as he did. That Texans are another team going through a regime change,
Mhm.
offensively, big time. So I don't think there's much standing in the way. If we often don't see people repeat fantasy success the very same year, one for one stats. But my goodness, if there is anyone who could do it, I think it could be Petrie.
The biggest player on his team last year that gave him a run for his money was Jonathan Owens, who also had a very nice uh, year,
Yeah,
but he's now in Green Bay.
right.
Nice transition from the Green Bay talk. So I'm
Yeah,
looking at this depth chart, and I mean,
yeah,
the where he is used in the defensive scheme,
mm,
uh, he is going to rack up tackles and be in spots to make these big plays.
mhm.
So I don't know why he's not in the top 25 ADP. Again, super happy that he's there. I, like you, typically fade defensive backs up until a certain point because you can find like the second or third best safety on most, bad defenses will be fantasy relevant because they'll, people throw the ball in those bad defenses. Uh,
Right.
but Petrie, he's young. He crossed his rookie year. Like he's
Yeah.
going to play a whole bunch. He's going to do a whole lot of stuff. Yeah, go get him.
Right, right. Not much reason to fade a guy like
No.
that. I mean, of course, like you said, people are going to talk regression, which is totally fair. And of course, that's probably going to happen. But if he regresses, 10%, it's still a hell of a a year, he could still finish as the number one defensive back. So I would take that. So yes, another. I think the guys that you're going to see on our ranking side that don't show up on the ADP side are just screaming values right now.
Mhm.
I think that ADP is going to catch up a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
We are only in the end of May here. So again, a lot of people haven't really woken up yet thinking about this stuff. So I think we'll see some changes, and we'll try to update you guys here as we see ADP movement. We're going to try to incorporate that into our discussions here. We'll talk about risers, fallers, things like that. But yeah, the guys that are on our rankings that aren't showing up on ADP are screaming values right now. And probably, should be showing up on the ADP very shortly. So next guy on the ADP side, linebacker, our linebacker 15 in ADP, Pete Werner from the New Orleans Saints. Guy who had a lot of buzz going into last year, if you were
Mhm.
talking to and following the right people, and he somewhat delivered on that. He did face some injuries, missed a couple of games. He was giving you an incredible floor with his tackles, but I don't know that he provided much more than those tackles, which is where I have a little bit of an issue with him. Playing next to Demario Davis, who's a stalwart in defense, but he's getting older, and had, during his missed games, had a complete no-name guy come out of nowhere in Caden Ellis and was giving you the games that we thought we were going to get out of Pete Werner as far as talking ceiling, because Ellis was getting after the quarterback and recording sacks along with giving us, 6-7 tackles a game. So I like Werner a lot. He's going to be on the field a ton, which is why the ADP likes him so much. I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic with him, and why I'm not super bullish on him in my rankings, and why I don't think he makes it onto our top 25.
Yeah, I think very similarly. I was one that was pretty high on him last year. Really, just the opportunity was there.
Yeah.
So he played 78% of the defensive snaps, right around what you'd want.
Mhm.
And when he was on the field, he was productive. He only
Right.
played in 11 games though, so he did have
Right.
some injury concerns. And you're always I guess there's two ways of thinking about Caden Ellis coming in and succeeding. One could just be, Warner's replaceable,
Right.
so he's not that good. Or two, that scheme is a defensive scheme that is going to benefit whatever linebacker is in that spot. Again, you don't
Mhm.
have to be good to be IDP relevant. Very
Yeah.
important to know.
Yes.
So I kind of like the Pete Werner linebacker 15 spot. I prefer
Yeah.
Quay Walker, but
Yeah.
earnestly, if we're talking about the other linebackers in that list or
Mhm.
people on the ADP, like I probably take him over Shaquille Leonard at this point, just
Mhm.
because of the opportunity to be there. Caden Ellis is no longer on the roster. Demar
Yeah.
Davis is continuing to get
Somehow still
older,
there.
so he's still there. So it still could limit uh, Warner's production,
Yeah.
but he has it. He has it all there. He just has yet to fully put it together. So the
Mhm.
fact that he's not in our top 25, I'm totally fine with that. If someone
Mhm.
wants to jump on that hype train and pick him at linebacker 15, I probably wouldn't scoff at it. Uh,
Mhm.
but I, people can do what they want to do, I suppose.
It feels like a slight reach, nothing crazy, but it's kind of a get your guy, and I get it.
Yeah.
78% of snaps. I think we're going to see that improve.
Yeah.
I think maybe he started the year a little slow. I think when he went out, they probably transitioned Davis into more of that traditional middle linebacker role, and then had Caden Ellis do what Davis was previously doing in rushing the quarterback along with his other duties at linebacker. So he kind of reaped the benefits from playing the previous Demario Davis role.
Mm.
So you can explain a little bit of that lack of production that we were, hoping to get last year. I really think that 78% is going to go. We're going to see that probably in the higher 80s, 85 to maybe 90%, hopefully. And if that happens, I think he's a smash for sure. It just, is it going to happen? We
Right.
don't have the crystal ball. So
Right.
a very solid player. Just feels like a slight reach. That's all. But if you like him, then more power to you. Nothing wrong with that. He's going to be a good IDP contributor for sure. Don't know that I would want him as being my cornerstone LB1.
No.
He would be a fantastic second linebacker on your team if you're somehow able to finagle that. I know it's not always easy, but yeah. So not saying anything wrong with that. He does just miss our top 25, but a slight reach. That's all. So flipping back to the ranking side, we've got this is a fun conversation, right? We've got our first guy that kind of toes the line of being an edge player. So we've got Hassan Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles. I've got the the verbiage there is DL9 / linebacker 17. So this goes back to whatever format you play, however your guys' positions are assigned to them. Reddick could be a linebacker. He could be a defensive end. He could be an edge player if you play on ESPN, which I really like that they did that. I wish they would put more resources into their IDP, having the setup that they do now. So, of course, we can have the conversation now that if he is locked into a linebacker role, he loses a little bit of value because of you have to be slotting him in there as a linebacker versus if he is eligible at defensive end, his value is where we want to see him and kind of why he's reflected in the rankings here, where he is as our 22nd or 23rd player in the rankings. So he had an amazing year, fits in that Philly defense. Now they did lose their coordinator, but I don't think they're going to make much of a change, especially with his role. The Eagles went sack crazy everywhere, the defensive line and the edge rushers. So might be a little bit harder to reproduce, but he's in the prime of his career. I don't see much reason to be fading Hassan Reddick. So what do you like about Reddick?
No, he kind of nailed it. Was super productive. All he does is get sacks. So the last 3 years, 12 and a half, 11, 16 across 3 different teams,
I mean,
3
that's
different
amazing.
coordinators. Like all he does is produce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, those tackle numbers aren't what you want them to be from a
Right.
linebacker necessarily. But getting 10 plus sacks certainly helps ease that burden, which kind of indicates where he is there. Different stuff happening in Philadelphia this upcoming year. But I love the fact that they went and got Jalen Carter. Like there's a lot of people for opposing offensive lines to pay attention to on
Yes.
the Eagles defense. And you could go and say, okay, everyone can't eat all the time. Well, they did last year. And I
Yeah.
don't really see that really changing.
Mhm.
I'm totally fine with people taking Hassan Reddick higher there on the ADP than where we have him.
Yes.
Sacks are often difficult to find at a regular increment. There's a lot of people that will have, I don't even know if he's on these lists, but Aiden Hutchinson last year, right, who had a lot of a couple of really big weeks, a couple of 3-sack weeks, right? So at the end of the year, like, oh, we had a pretty good rookie year. Well, that
Right.
only helped you on the 2 weeks that you actually played him
Yes.
versus someone like Hassan Reddick who will what I think is like 2/3 of the game at least.
Yeah.
He ended up with a sack, which is incredible consistency for the spot. He's done it for a few years.
Yeah.
I think we slotted him perfectly in the right spot here.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Great pickup. I forgot to mention that he also duplicates on the ADP. He's actually higher in the
Mhm.
ADP by about I want to say about 5-6 spots in ADP. So 22 up into the teens on ADP, which is great to see because it feels like Reddick, like you said, over the past 3 years, 3 different coordinators, teams, like nobody seemed to have believed in him until this year finally in Philly. So it feels like maybe even IDP players are still, maybe not buying in, but if you're not going to buy in at this point, then I don't know
Right.
what to tell you. So I think he's probably even too low on our rankings. But it's tough when you start mixing. Are you thinking about, like we were talking about, where the designations lie, linebacker, defensive line, edge player? Where does he actually fit in? So I think we kind of try to take him just more even keeled. Uh, judgment on him when we saw him into the rankings. So, but he feels like value in the rankings, and he's probably just about right over on the ADP. It's actually the same. If we're considering him a D line, he's still actually the D line 9 over in ADP, but the linebacker 12 versus linebacker 17 in rankings. So if you play on sleeper, he's got that sweet dual eligibility. You got to love that. And that's probably why he is so high in the ADP, because that's where we source our ADP on sleeper. So when you can fill him in multiple positions, that just adds to his value as an IDP player. So feels like, yeah, he's another guy that, as we grow up the list, we're going to be talking about all good players. So it's tough to kind of find chinks in the armor right now in a lot of these guys. So as we flip over then to the ADP, defensive lineman number 10, Quinnen Williams, shows up on ADP. Now, he is not on the ranking side. So this is another guy that, at first glance, this might feel a little bit of like reachy. I think the people that we mock draft with to build this ADP do tend to like to build their defensive lines up a little sooner than we might suggest in the rankings, which is totally fair and totally a good strategy, because defensive line, I had an argument with someone a few weeks ago on Twitter where I said the defensive line is not as is a bit shallow, and I was getting yelled at about that, because I think of all these dual eligibility guys, right, like the Reddicks of the world, which is fair in that respect. But I was more speaking about the top end guys that are going to give you consistency. So as an entire position, sure, I guess defensive line is pretty deep, but you're going to have to pick, if you're not playing best ball, you're going to have to pick the right weeks to start them. And God help you if you can do that.
Yeah.
And good luck, So guys like Quinnen Williams give you that, and Christian Wilkins, who we touched on, that are these consistent guys. Often people that have experience playing IDP will tend to draft those consistent D linemen a lot sooner than maybe other people would, or people that aren't sort of aware of this message that defensive line is shallow as far as elite consistent producers, which is what I was trying to say. So yeah, I don't mind seeing Quinnen Williams here on the ADP, and I also agree that he probably isn't going to make it to our top 25 in rankings just because of philosophical differences.
Yeah, I think that's right. So if you can get Quinnen Williams as a defensive tackle, like if you're in a league that defensive tackle is different, you require a defensive tackle. Yeah, he was a stud last year. Kind of came out of nowhere. 12 sacks, awesome. Kind of found something there on that Jets defense. But as you said, getting consistent sack production is a very hard thing to find. And like you said on the ADP, what we got for these source things here, typically sacks are at a premium. So I completely understand why he's all the way up there at DL10. I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, you can't even see our DL10 on our consensus
exactly,
because they didn't make it. So I think that's about right for where he should be. Not really much of a tackle floor. He kind of had last year was his biggest year, bit of an outlier in the sense if you look at his resume. I don't see any changes on the Jets defense that would indicate that couldn't be the expectation again. Getting 12 sacks is difficult, so I could see some regression there. But he's the person that I'll be targeting, especially in defensive tackle required leagues. I really like Quinnen Williams, except when he's playing my Patriots.
Oh boy, yeah. We got an Eagles fan and a Patriots fan here, close to mortal enemies at this point. But so yeah, it's tough to get sacks from that interior, defensive position. And yeah, like you said, it's not something you can necessarily count on. 12 is a lot. So that's kind of why we're a little less enthusiastic about him from a ranking standpoint. He is in contract negotiations, so if you're really putting your big dynasty brain hat on, there could be trouble in the waters there. I'm hearing it's getting closer to an agreement, but if they don't and there's holdouts and you're missing games from him, or if they trade him, or he ends up somewhere else, is it going to be as friendly of a system to his position? Now he's a he's an elite player, so he should be system proof. But you never know with these coaches, right? And the Jets, like a lot of teams, they rotate the defensive line. Do you have his snaps up there by any chance? I would imagine it's hanging around the 70s, probably, maybe
Yeah,
higher.
65%.
Okay, yeah. So a little bit lower even.
Mm-hmm.
So to have that much production on 65% of snaps just shows you how elite of a talent that he is. However, this is why defensive line fluctuates every year. The top 12 guys that you see one year, especially the bottom, half of that list is often a totally complete new set of players every year because sack production is just like touchdowns. It's incredibly difficult to protect and count on any sort of, he did it last year, so he's going to do it this year. That you can't really think like that. So,
100%.
the more we're talking through that, the more I don't love seeing him that high, but I get it. If you're trying to build, a strong defensive line depth, then he's totally a player you should be after. I just prefer sometimes to let other people take a guy like that. I want the elite of the elite, your Bosa's and your Crosby's of the world, the Williams of the world. Unless they fall to me at a value, I don't have. He doesn't find his way onto many of my real or mock drafted teams, unfortunately. Again, not bashing him as a player or an IDP asset, but just not at that price for me. No, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, guy, I'm flipping over to the ranking side is our LB16 who shows up. A very interesting name that comes up here.
Mm-hmm.
The Baltimore Ravens linebacker, Patrick Queen. Um, just setting the stage for him. He did not have his 5th-year rookie option picked up, and they drafted a really good player, albeit only in the 4th round, in Trenton Simpson, who seems like he's going to be out the door this year, and Simpson's going to be walking in, playing next to Roquan Smith. So Queen put up, actually, he's been kind of an up and down guy, right? He had very lofty expectations coming out as a first rounder a few years ago. I feel like he's kind of given us good year, bad year, good year, bad, or bad year, good year, bad year, good year. He did give us good production this past season. But he's probably going to be in a new home next year. Now he still has that first round draft capital, which means he's probably going to get a shot, a la Devin Bush, signing on with the Seahawks this year. So teams are going to be interested in him just because of that first round draft capital. But as a dynasty player, he might be a little high for my liking here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. He's such a fascinating person that the expectations were set so high, it was almost impossible for him to actually reach those expectations. And he was one of those people that, pay attention to people that don't have a great necessarily start to their year. Because last year he was being drafted, I don't know, in the 30s. And he ended up putting up a really nice year. He played 94% of the snaps. That's huge. Even once Roquan Smith came in from the Bears, like, oh no, maybe Queen's time is up this miracle year. Nope, he continued to produce. He continued to produce excellent value there alongside Smith. Like you said, there's some buyer beware with the dynasty aspect of things, with Simpson now on the roster, with the declined 5th-year option. He's probably going to end up somewhere else, and that's kind of a roll of the dice. If you are in a win now sort of situation, he's someone that I feel very comfortable with as my linebacker too, rolling into this year, especially in redraft. So I think that's sort of where we have him ranked here. I know this is dynasty rankings, but that first round capital, the production he's going to have this year, linebacker 16 feels pretty safe to me because there is non-zero chance he's still relevant after he's done with the Ravens, but especially for this year, I don't see Simpson really eating into his playing time, injury permitting.
I think that's the driving factor of him being this high in our rankings anyway, is that, right, we're trying to blend the dynasty versus you still want to win, win your league. I think Queen is definitely a guy that can help you win your league this year. And, if he keeps the ball rolling off of last year and has a really good year, helps you win this year, you could probably unload him then to someone, trade him away after this year if you don't think he's going to catch on with a new team, or maybe the Ravens sign him to a weird 1-year prove it again deal type situation. Let Simpson continue to marinate there in the background. But but now, yes, he transitioning away from his more a more of a traditional middle linebacker role, and calling plays, reading defenses, which I don't think he's that good at. I think there's a lot of, if you're into like PFF grades and stuff, I don't think he grades out super well. But I think taking him away from that role once they brought Roquan in to do that, and allowing him to just be the pure ridiculous athlete and monster that he can be, that got him drafted in the first round, allows him to be an amazing IDP player, racking up sacks. He can, I think he's going to go after the quarterback a lot more
Mhm.
this year. So I definitely think he can continue with the production that he had from last year and still give you a really nice year, which I think is driving the rankings there. So, um,
100%.
yeah, totally. So, let me flip to, okay. I'm going to jump around a little bit here because I want to talk about some guys
Let's do it.
who don't either, don't appear on both sides. So one that I'm looking at on our ranking side, LB14, Tremaine Edmonds in
Mm.
Chicago. I wanted to touch on him. He is someone who I personally am bullish on. Now, I haven't been while he's been in Buffalo. He's been pretty disappointing in Buffalo, right? From what our expectations were. He finally had a pretty good year last year, I think. Um, but I think now taking over this, basically the Roquan role in Chicago, and that offense still, we're really not sure what it's going to be. A lot of people are projecting lofty expectations, but that remains to be seen. I think Tremaine Edmonds is a ridiculous value. He does not show up on the ADP top 25. I think we have him ranked even possibly too low, but just about right. So I think he's been someone I've been getting everywhere in these, March through May drafts that we've been doing right now. Like people are down on him from his years in Buffalo. I think he figures it out this year and just goes nuts this year. So what do you think about Edmonds?
I think we spent too much time together because I have the same exact thought. I mean, talk about we talked about Caden Ellis a bit earlier with the Saints kind of coming out of
Yeah.
nowhere and being very fantasy relevant. Can we all just remember the 3 or 4 weeks when Jack Sanborn was an IDP
Yeah.
god last
Yeah.
year? Like he came out of nowhere and was super fantasy relevant, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I see this Bears scheme as producing very good production for linebackers. Obviously, Roquan Smith, we were talked about a little bit, I guess, in relation to Patrick Queen.
Right.
He was a beast. Nicholas Morrow last year had a perfectly reasonable, LB3, LB
Mhm.
flex sort of fantasy season. So we know the Bears defense. We don't really know where the snaps are going to go when it comes to Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards because they, spent a lot of money in free agency to fill that linebacker spot.
Right.
But based off of just the pedigree, I like Edmonds has the opportunity to put up just a whole bunch of stats, right?
Yeah.
Because like the Bears have already proven that they can support two fantasy relevant
Yep.
linebackers.
Exactly.
So I both him and TJ Edwards, I think
Yeah.
people are. I don't think they're on. Edwards is not on either list, right?
No, no.
Uh, but both people that people are kind of sleeping on because I mean people don't usually move on from their first team and you feel great about them, right?
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, if you're that good, they would have kept them, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's just a bad fit, sometimes they just go a different direction, and I feel like that's the case for both of these players, where people are going to kind of forget about them. They're going to slide into the 20s, and then you're going to have like you said, linebackers on a potentially we think improved offensive team, but
Right.
potentially not the best offensive team that have a whole bunch of
Yeah.
snaps. And before you know it, you have a guy that's getting you 120 combined tackles at
Yeah.
least. So I love both of them as we'll I guess we can call them sleepers if we have them higher
Yeah.
in the consensus rank. That should change. And if it doesn't, then we're going to be winning a whole bunch of fantasy leagues this year.
Yeah. And so another guy I want to touch on before we get you out of here. So versus a guy like Fred Warner, right? For the
Mm,
San Francisco 49ers. He's LB6 in the ADP. He's even LB10 in our rankings. For me, I think I want an Edmonds over a Warner because Warner gets I don't know what it is. I I feel like he's overvalued by everyone, just about. Yes, he's a starting linebacker for a great defense. See, I think that's what it is. I think that the San Francisco defense as a whole is so good, and he's sort of the captain, right, as the top linebacker there, that he gets all the flowers for the unit, along, of course, with Nick Bosa. Everyone knows he's a top D end, but I think I'm in Dynasty in 2023 regular fantasy football. I think I want Edmonds over Warner. Do you share that sentiment, or
Yeah, I think it depends on what
close?
I'm going for with my roster construction. So
Yeah,
why Warner's up there, right? He doesn't typically finish in the top 5, but he's
yeah,
not going to be the disaster pick that ruins
true.
your team. He's kind of like the safe linebacker. So I'm looking at one of my leagues where it's fairly average scoring, so
Okay,
not like sack predominant. He finished as linebacker 24 last year,
yeah,
which is not great, not good,
yeah.
especially
So
not at the linebacker,
at
what,
those
6
prices,
or
right?
9 price, right? He did come on strong. He started off pretty poor, but then he
Yeah,
got more average production. Uh, so yeah, it depends on what I'm going for. If I want that safe pick who I know is not going to completely tank my redraft
yeah.
team because he's just not going to do it at all, then yeah, then Fred Warner is fine. I do think I wouldn't go up to 6. Like if you're telling me he's like a linebacker 9-10, so linebacker 1-2 sort of build. Great. I'd pair him with someone, try to pair him with someone with some more upside, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, he's a weird one. He really
Yeah.
is. Like I do think you're right. People think way more highly of him than
Mhm.
his production necessarily warrants. Uh,
Yeah.
but again, if you kind of wait on linebacker and you kind of do I'm gonna grab the ninth and 10th best linebackers to fill out my 2 linebacker spots, I think he works there. But if you're
Mhm.
relying on him to be that linebacker stud, like he's my one, and fade, like wait till later to get your second
Right.
linebacker, I think that's a poor choice.
Yes. Yeah. Being an anchor linebacker, I totally agree. I think if you want him, fine, go get him. But I would be grabbing an Edmonds to pair with him, and maybe reaching for an Edmonds, potentially to go on with him, as sort of a
Exactly.
backup there. So,
Well,
I
linebacker 6 indicates that he's a stud, like he's going to be your
yeah.
anchor, right? And I don't think you should be valuing him like that.
Right. Yeah. I think he missed some games last year. Did he? I think that may have led to him if he was
No, he
linebacker
he, he
24.
played he played 17.
Oh wow,
He
so
played
that's even
17 games.
worse. Okay, I thought
hmm
maybe I think maybe I'm thinking of Greenlaw missed a
Yeah,
handful.
Greenlaw did.
But yeah, so I think Warner kind of lives on some of those bigger splash plays, so people get these spike games from him. But he has a tendency to disappear on you, especially again because the defense as a whole is so good. They're limiting offenses, to not being on the field as much. So there's just less opportunity for him. Whereas versus a guy like Edmonds on the Bears, we know that the team itself or the defense itself is going to be out there a lot more and are going to play a lot more overall total snaps. Than a team like San Francisco. I think that may have been an issue for Edmonds on the Bills, right? He
Mhm.
kind of came in, at the resurgence of the Bills offense with Josh Allen, and they're crushing teams, and there's just not as much opportunity for him to have been on the field. So I think that changes this year. So those are 2 guys I wanted to highlight, that I would almost like to see a flip flop, in both their
Mhm.
rankings and their ADP, and I think it's going to shake out that way, if they both play full seasons here. So I know we got to get you going. Please tell people, what you do here, everywhere you contribute to, where they can find you, and then leave us, if you could, with a kind of a deeper sleeper dart throw type guy who's on your radar that you're just in all your mocks and your rookie drafts, if they happen to be a rookie, or your startups, a guy that you're just like going after in those like round 20 or round like 3 or 4 of rookie drafts, stuff like that. Give us,
Yeah.
if you want to give us a couple names, even whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so you can find me over on Twitter predominantly at mrecord21, as well as the IDP guys and Club Fantasy, their YouTube channels. So I try to make fun content. You'll find me making a lot of musical parodies. Try to make things that I don't necessarily see as much on the internet that bring me joy, which people seem to typically, or people seem to have a positive response to. So that's good. At IDP, guys, I am one of the lead rankers here. I'm a writer, and again, I do make those silly videos. So go check them out anywhere that you watch videos. In terms of like a deeper sleeper, I have to be a little bit of a homer with my Patriots here, but it's Jawan Bentley. Like people have this reputation. There's this reputation with the Patriots defense that people always like. You have to avoid them, kind of like their running backs. Like it's always by committee. You can't trust anyone to do anything. I don't know. Bentley last year, he played 80% of the defensive snaps. He had 125 combined tackles. That's 2 straight years with the Pats that he has over 100 combined tackles. I say we really didn't do anything to change his status on this defense. I know I'm blanking on his name. There is a rookie linebacker that people are claiming like, oh, he's going to take Bentley's spot. What was his name?
Marpu, Marte
Yeah,
Mapu.
yeah, him. Like, cool. Have you watched the Patriots and the Bill Belichick trusting a rookie their freshman year? No, they get redshirted. I would be surprised if he starts playing right off the bat. So if you're talking like a deep sleeper that people always forget about, I'm finding Bentley very late in my best ball drafts I'm doing right now because people don't want any part of him. But what you're going to get is a certified linebacker 3, not sexy, but consistent playtime, consistent production, which in a time when people are more going for dart throws, I can be fine with getting Jawan Bentley.
That is such a perfect, um, perfect explanation of what happens with not only IDP but Dynasty in general and age bias. Marty Mapu is a cool name. He's a fun guy to want to take shots on, and he's probably going before Bentley because it's new shiny toy syndrome. However, it's the guys like Bentley who can step in if your Fred Warners or your Edmonds go down with injury and give you some really productive games. I totally agree. I think we're not just going to see Belichick hand the keys over to a rookie, right? After a guy who's been productive. Now, he does love to, rotate, and they don't play maybe the most consistent amount of snaps, but he is the captain, I would say, of that defense. So
Yeah.
I absolutely love that name. I absolutely love all of your videos that you do. You are the fantasy football Weird Al Yankovic. And as a huge fan of Weird Al Yankovic, your videos bring smiles on my face every single time I see them. So, yes, please check out Matt's stuff on Club Fantasy, on IDP, guys. It is amazing. If you like to have fun, if you enjoy music, he just puts out awesome stuff. So we love having you as part of the team. And thank you so much for joining me here today.
Well, thank you, Steve. Looking forward to doing this
Yes.
more regularly.
Absolutely. We are going to shoot to bring you this stuff, hopefully every week. We're going to shoot for, especially in season. That's really the goal. Maybe, the off season, we might be a little sporadic here. People go on vacations, people have the summer to get through. So, we might be a little sporadic, but we're going to do our best to be consistent with you here. So,
You dang right. Right.
I appreciate it, man. All right. Let me see here. I'm gonna stay here with you and finish off the comparison of these lists here, and mainly touch on guys that I think are, the discrepancies between the ADP and the rankings are something that I would like to talk through and point out and just try to give you advice on. So after we talked about Quinton Williams, Patrick Queen, we are jumping up on the ADP side to Jeremy Chin, who shows up as the DB2, or he's got a linebacker eligibility in some format. So he's the LB14 in ADP. He does not show up on the rankings list as a top 25 guy. And I think Chin's been sort of another guy who's, he's a big name that coming out as a rookie, especially, a lot of people were very high on, and he had a good rookie season. Since then, he's been a little bit of a not totally playing up to par from what we got out of his rookie season. So he's a guy that, again, is sort of living on name right now. Now, we've got a lot of defensive change in Carolina, whole new regime, whole new coaching system, whole new scheme. So it's going to be very interesting to see where he ends up playing. I think if he can play, which he's best at, down towards the line as sort of one of those box safeties, he could very well return, on this ADP ranking as in the 20s. I think he's a 19th player off the board defensively. So if we get him fit into the right scheme, I think Jeremy Chin is a guy who can definitely return on your investment there. I just don't know that I want to bet on it that early. So he is not in the top 25 consensus. He's still a player very much like, but I am just taking a little bit more of a sort of a step back approach, kind of wait and see approach. He's still a very strong dynasty asset, especially if you are plugging him in as a defensive back and he is playing a lot of snaps more at the line. That is what we want to have happen. We just don't know if that is going to happen in Carolina with the new regime. They are a bit weak at linebacker with Shaq Thompson being their best linebacker. They did bring in Von Bell as a safety this year, so kind of replacing Xavier Woods, but likely playing more of that deeper free safety traditional role versus if Chin, is on the field in a defensive back duties, he's probably playing that more traditional strong safety. So either one of those, I think, are really what we want to see from his position designation. We just are hoping for that production to sort of catch up with what we've been expecting for a few years now. So don't mind him there. I just, I'm again another guy that, when he's not showing up on our ranking side, I'm kind of going to label him as a bit of a little bit of a reach player there. So flipping over to the rankings, the next guy on the rankings is at number 20. He's a DL8 or the linebacker 15, another edge kind of tweener guy in Kayvon Thibodeau for the New York Giants. I'm very bullish on him. I think he goes nuts this year. I actually like him and Azeez Ojulari a lot. Both of them together. If you've got both of them on your team, I think between the two of them, you're going to get very solid weeks every single week. If it's not one, it's going to be the other, and often it's going to be both of them getting home and getting sacks on the quarterback this year. So that whole defensive front is stacked with Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence on the inside. So they are just that front four is just set up to be one of the most dominant in the league this year. They can stop the run, and those two guys on the edge are going to cause a lot of problems. So it's going to be hard to double team anyone. We saw Thibodeau have a really good later in the year. In the season, he had an amazing week that won a lot of people weeks and got them boosted through your fantasy playoffs. So I think Thibodeau is primed for takeoff, and he's actually higher on the ADP side. So he's the still DL8, but the linebacker 11 on the ADP side. So I think it's wheels up for a guy like Thibodeau. Flipping back to the ADP side, we've got Frankie Louvu coming off as the 19th defensive player. I think he's living off of his really good year last year. He came out of nowhere playing next to Shaq Thompson. He was kind of that go get the quarterback type linebacker role. So he was rushing the passer a ton, and he got home. So there's nothing wrong with that. But he's just a guy that I think it's going to be really tough for him to repeat the production that he had last year. So he finished as a top 10 guy. I think he was a top 3 even linebacker. So he had an amazing year. Totally get that. But especially if we're playing Dynasty, I think he's an incredible sell high option if you can get someone to buy in. And considering where he's being taken, I think there is demand for Frankie Louvu. So my advice would be, if you already have Frankie Louvu on your Dynasty team, I would probably be trying to sell him off the year he had. Maybe you can get a nice second round pick, which a lot of times is landing you a guy like Jack Campbell, maybe even Will Anderson, who we're going to talk about coming up here. So I am not that I hate Frankie Louvu. I'm just not betting on him repeating the insane year that he had last year. So Frankie Louvu, another guy, feels like a reach. He shows up on the ADP top 25. He is not in the top 25 consensus ranking. So we talked about Tremaine Edmonds, so I'm going to skip over him back on the ranking side. Right above him, we've got Brian Burns as the DL7. So a lot of Carolina guys showing up here, in this mid area, because again, not great on the offensive side of the ball. So what happens? They're playing a lot of defense. So you see these guys, and that is a strategy to take defensive players from bad offensive teams. And that can work out sometimes. It's certainly working out here with Carolina, producing at all levels, giving you a top DB, a top LB, and a top defensive lineman. So Brian Burns, he's young. He's coming into his own. He is a potential double-digit sacks per year guy. Big fan of his. He is the DL6 on the ADP side. So another guy, he's higher on the ADP side than the ranking side, but he's still a guy that is, it's not off by too much. What did I just say? DL6 versus DL7. So we're not talking about too much of a discrepancy here. There's not much else to say about him. He's a really good player, really good IDP asset to have on your team, especially in Dynasty, being in that, mid to early 20s age. He's going to be playing for quite some time. Hopefully Carolina keeps him around, but you never know. A guy I want to definitely touch on. So Derwin James is the DB1 pretty much everywhere. No, I haven't seen many people. Some people have Petrie above him, but Derwin James is really the standard at defensive back. He's had some injury issues over the years, but hopefully he's over that. And I mean, he's just a monster. You can't really go wrong in taking Derwin James. He's probably the only defensive back that I'd advocate reaching for, or I usually don't. I usually punt on defensive backs when I'm drafting, whether it be dynasty or redraft league. So, but he's one of the few exceptions where, as long as I'm not, I'd love to pair him with one of the top like defensive linemen. So if I'm like on a swing pick, let's say, if I can grab a top defensive lineman and grab Derwin James, I think that's a nice little combination to have there. So yeah, there's nothing really bad to say about Derwin James. He's a DB1 both in ADP and the rankings, so which totally makes sense and is 100% accurate. A guy that comes up next on the ranking side as LB13 is Zaire Franklin, who is going off the ADP side as LB9. So a slight discrepancy there, but nothing too much. We're only talking about 4 spots as LB. He seems to possibly be the heir to the Shaq Leonard throne. If Shaq Leonard, doesn't make the strides he needs to make through his injuries to come back as a full-time player, we saw Zaire Franklin have obviously his best year. He's kind of another guy that came out of nowhere. But he was, well over 100 tackles. He was giving you some splash plays, getting turnovers, fumble forces, recoveries, interception. Like he kind of has the tools to do everything. Now, my only concern is it took him, I believe this was his 4th or 5th year in the league to get that playing time. And it took Shaq Leonard going down in front of him to really, break through and produce as an IDP player and an NFL player. Because prior to this year, I mean, nobody was even rostering him, even in deep leagues, because he was just giving you nothing. He wasn't seeing the field. So that is my only sort of concern about Franklin. And I'm probably individually a bit lower on him in rankings than most. You kind of have to force him up there because he was playing alongside Bobby O together in Indianapolis there, and they both were producing, both having really good years. Franklin just was the guy that, was on the field the whole time. So he's an interesting guy. I'm not reaching for him for sure, and he isn't finding his way to many of my teams. There's a handful that I got him. I think like in an IDP only best ball, I got him in like the third round, which is about probably I think like later third round as well, which is about where I want him. I think he's normally going a lot earlier than that, and if you believe in him, if you think he's going to keep it up, then more power to you. I just don't love that it took multiple years and an injury to, a perennial stud at the position for him to get an opportunity and see the field even. So that just makes me a little bit cautious. But with Shaq Leonard's health issues going into this year, it's tough to kind of fade him. He's sort of he feels like me, like he should be closer with Patrick Queen, and he gives me Patrick Queen vibes despite not being a first round draft pick. So it feels like he's going to help you a lot this year, but after this year, who knows? If he doesn't play well as an NFL player, so yeah, he might be racking up the IDP stats, but if he's giving up big plays on the field and missing tackles, things that would lead his team and his coaches to lose faith in him, it's probably gonna be tough for him to get a shot somewhere else. We just saw Rashaan Evans, right? Have an incredible year, finally break through. Similar situation. Took him a few years. He broke through. He was on a 1-year deal, and nobody signed him yet. He's still a free agent. Zaire Franklin, I think, gives me very much Rashaan Evans vibes there. And that I believe this could be closing in on the last year of his contract. He might have another amazing year, but if there's no market demand for him, he could find himself out of a job next year. We've seen crazier things happen. So, just a word of caution there. If you're buying into the Franklin hype, again, if you've got him on your team right now, might be a great time to try and go sell, even prior to the start of this year. But if he also has an amazing year again this year, which is very possible, my advice would be to definitely sell heading into the 2024 season for sure, just because we don't know what's going to happen, and I think you could get some really nice return there for a guy like Franklin. So that's where we're going to leave you here. We're going to pick things back up with Matt again and try to finish off this list of comparison of IDP, ADP versus consensus ranks. They've been up on the screen. You can take a look and give us some thoughts. What do who do you want us to touch on? We're approaching the studliest of the studs right now. So we're going to be talking about the big names very soon here. But I wanted to go from the bottom up, kind of touch on some guys that maybe don't get talked about as frequently as either, right now it's rookie fever and it's, stud discussion topic time. So I think we, are trying to give you a breadth of knowledge across, a lot of players that you might not hear kind of in-depth conversations about. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. Again, Matt is an awesome talent, both in the vocal cords as well as playing fantasy football. He knows what he's talking about. So we're going to try to link back up here, finish off this list. I am Dynasty Santa on Twitter. I live there pretty much. I love to spout out my takes and answer questions. My DMs are open. Feel free to ask me questions there. We'd love to have you interact here on this is going to be publishing to YouTube as well as the audio only on anywhere you can listen to a podcast. So if you've got feedback for us, come find us on our main Twitter account at IDP guys. We'd love to talk through things with you there. Like I said, give feedback, comment here. And yeah, we're just going to try to help you out here with a new IDP podcast, some fresh new takes on some of these players. And I'm going to leave you here. So I had Matt leave you with a deep sleeper. He actually mentioned this name earlier in the podcast. which I think was funny. He must have been reading my mind. So the Cowboys rookie linebacker, DeMarvion Overshown, I think I'm growing on him every day. Just looking at the kind of landscape of the Cowboys linebacking situation, they did bring back Leighton Vander Esch for a 1-year deal. I don't think he's back beyond that. So even if Overshown sits for a year, I still think he could find his value increasing going into next year. And right now, you can get him pretty cheap. So, and I think there's a chance, he could see the field this year even. The Cowboys, beyond Vander Esch, we've heard that Parsons is going to play more of a traditional defensive line role, hand in the dirt. So that opens up linebacker snaps. And I think they realize that, and is why they picked Overshown. I believe he was either a 3rd or 4th round pick. So decent draft capital for a linebacker. And I think they saw the writing on the wall. Beyond him, they've got a pretty weak room. I know a lot of people were counting on Damone Clark to get some playing time this year, and he very well could. Jabril Cox is still there. They brought in Anthony Barr for some games last year. He's kind of an ancient name at this point. He's not there. They did not bring him back this year. So even if Vander Esch plays the traditional middle linebacker, approaching 100% of snaps, there's still a wide open spot for that LB2. And if that LB2 is going to be, able to cover tight ends or be more of that sort of wild card of the defense, maybe go after the quarterback on the opposite side of Parsons. Whoever fills that role, I think could have some very sneaky value that you can get for basically free right now. So whether it's Overshown, whether it's Clark, whether it's Cox, that's probably how I would rank them in that order to fill that linebacker 2 role. All of them are worth possibly taking shots on, depending on how deep of a league you play in. I wouldn't recommend Clark or Cox in a league that isn't, 40 to a full 53-man roster. And yes, there are leagues like that. I'm playing a few myself. So you are rostering guys like that potentially. But Overshown, is an exciting rookie. I'm trying not to fall for the rookie fever trap, but he feels like a guy who could really, break through in his very first year. And even if he doesn't, he's a strong hold for me going into the 2024 season with basically complete unknown in that linebacking core, with Vander Esch likely moving on unless he missed games last year. So unless he plays a full season and is giving production this year, I don't believe he's going to be back. So there's going to be wide open room. If it doesn't happen this year, even better of a chance for it to happen next year. So we will leave you with that. We appreciate anyone tuning into this, and just looking forward to bringing you this content. Like I said, we're planning for this podcast to be not only IDP centric, touching on offense, touching on gambling, touching on league commissioner settings. We want to help you figure out how to set up your IDP leagues, scoring settings. We'll take mailbag questions if you have questions that are specific to your leagues. We would love to talk through those for you on the show here. So please send those in. Like I said, Twitter DMs, comments on the YouTube page. We will take them and answer them as much as we can. So this is Dynasty Santa signing out. Happy Memorial Day to everyone, and really look forward to a really great IDP season this year. So thanks so much for listening.